taken by madness, sadness in a sea of stolen words, broken and shattered. What mattered means no more. In a time shaken by thunder, wonder is the seed of life foregone, crippling under. What happened to us all? We fade, pulled back into the shade. We fade, pulled back into the shade. Just fade away, locked into a memory. You can't save the day. If only you had tried. Just fade away, locked into a memory. You can't save the day. If only you had tried. Across the ocean blue, a wave will rise, consuming all who walk through day and night. My heart is beating with the drums. The breath is coursing through my lungs again. Or is it just a trick of time? Cool, check. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Claire. We're back again for another episode of Tips and Tricks. Today we had I had a couple of scheduling things going on, so this is pre-recorded, but I'm hanging out in the chat. So if you want to ask questions, feel free to do that. I'm still going to be answering any questions that you might have, but really excited to be with you all again. Welcome back to 343 TV. We are a weekly series, a daily series actually, run by 343 Labs, where we have live streams every day at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And each of the streams we have on every day of the week is hosted by one of our instructors or our team members. For example, I'm Claire, like I mentioned. And for those of you who are just joining in, I am an Ableton Certified Instructor and also an instructor at 343 Labs. Ableton Certified Trainer. Sorry, goodness. All my terminology is like, oh. But yeah, I'm an instructor at 343 Labs. I mainly teach a lot of the topics related to Ableton Live and production and writing, these related sorts of things. And 343 Labs, we are a school based in New York, but now kind of, I guess, on the greater internet, online with everything that's been going on for the past year with the pandemic. We also have a school in Berlin that's currently being a little more active, I guess, than the New York side, just because of the way that things are working with the health management situation over there. But yeah, really happy to be back again for the weekly show that I host on Mondays called Tips and Tricks for things related to Ableton Live. And this week is so exciting because Tuesday, which is tomorrow, the day after this is airing, we're going to have the official release of Live 11, which is what you're seeing now. So Ableton Live is the software created by the company Ableton. And Live 11 was announced as a public beta at the end of last year, which we were all very excited about. And now it's finally going to be released. Woo! So we're super excited for that too. And when Live 11 first came out, because 343 Labs is a Ableton Certified Training Center as well, a number of our instructors were very, very excited about it, myself included, and we made some preliminary content related to Live 11. So you can check that out right now on our YouTube channel. There's a couple of videos where we talk about Live and show you some of the features. We had a couple of Ableton user groups that also mentioned Live 11, so that's something that we also host at 343 Labs, the New York Ableton user group, albeit now like virtually though, because obviously we haven't been meeting in person. But yeah, so lots of that going on. Tuesday, tomorrow, in addition to the release of Live, we're also going to have a release of something else, so stay tuned from 343 Labs. I'm very excited about it, and I know a number of us
in the team are very excited about it too. But hi to everyone in the community who's joining us. I'll try to say hi in the chat, so if you want to say hi back, you're more than welcome to. And also just to maybe clarify as well, if you are tuning in for the first time, yes, my name's Claire, and that's what I go by professionally when I teach, but you may also be familiar with some of my work under my artist project dolltr, so that's dolltr !CK in all lowercase letters, and that's a little bit of what we're doing today with the musical example I'm going to show you. This is one that we worked on a bunch in previous streams, but I'm going to show you a classic, I guess, sort of vocoder technique, vocal synthesis that I use in a lot of my dolltr music, and it doesn't even involve anything that's outside of Live. We're going to use Live's native vocoder device to do some vocal synthesis and elaborate a little bit more on what that means in a moment. But throw back to last week's stream, I talked specifically about Vocal Synth 2 by iZotope, and thank you everyone who tuned in for that. If you want to watch the replay, it's also up on our YouTube channel, but we did a little bit of like, how do we actually, do vocal synthesis using this plugin? And Vocal Synth 2 is one of my personal favorite devices out there for vocal synthesis. I've also tried out Waves Ovox, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but that's it. Most of the time, especially if you've ever seen me do a live electronic performance, which if you follow me on socials, you might have seen me do a lot of, that's one of my specialties, I'm more often than not using just Live's native vocoder. In part, it's because I like the way that it functions. I like its functionality, but also I've been able to get a lot of mileage out of it. It tends to be a little more CPU friendly than third-party plugins. And iZotope's vocal synth, as much as I love it, if you tuned into last week's stream, you would have seen some crazy CPU action going on. So today, we're going to focus on vocoder in Live, and let's get started by reviewing this song that's called Rewind. So this is from my dolltr project. Let's take a listen to what we got so far, though. We got some keys going as a chord progression already in here, and we've also got some vocals that we worked on in previous weeks. This has been like a vocal series in a way related to Ableton Live with some different things that I've been doing for season 3 of the TV show. But let's go ahead and take a listen and let's recap some of what we've done, or at least get an idea of what we're working with moving forward for today's stream. So here we go.
Is it real or is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
Cool, and then the chord progression kind of goes on and on. Okay, cool. But yeah, that initial bit that we did was something that we have been, I guess, doing as a little bit of a series. We recorded the vocal in the very first week. We tuned it. We did a comp of it, did some takes using take lanes, which are new in Live 11. So very cool stuff. And then here we are with a couple of different layers that we did in previous weeks too, like vocal chops, vocal printing and vocal transposition with audio. But what if we want to do some kind of vocoder thing with this? So what I'm going to walk you through is just how to get up and running with the vocoder device. So let's get started by heading over here into the browser on the left in Live. And I'm going to head over to Audio Effects. Now, starting from Live 11, the vocoder is no longer just living on its own in the giant section of audio effects. What has happened with Live 11 is that the audio effects are now categorized into different categories. So things like delay and loop, you would find, say, beat repeat stuff, delay devices over here as audio effects. So each of these things have their own little, I guess, their own characteristics if you think about like what exactly each category pertains to. In our case, though, we're looking for vocoder. So like, let's say we're not sure where vocoder is. We can always use the browser to type things in. And that's something that I am a big advocate of, just because if you aren't sure of where something is, just look it up. That kind of applies to a lot of the things that I mention in my approaches to learning and approaches to teaching. But let's keep on point. So over here, what I want to do is I want to head over to reverb and resonance. And granted, this is a little bit of a weird category for vocoder 11, but if you think about it, it is kind of, making something resonate in a certain way, depending on your routing and stuff. So I guess it makes sense. But here is vocoder in Live 11. let's go ahead and first of all, we're just going to drag it and drop it directly on my vocal. And you'll notice that we did have a previous chain that we used for our processing. We had some EQ, we had a compressor, we also had a chorus ensemble device, which is the updated chorus device in Live. So actually, let's go ahead and solo this. And I'm going to turn off the vocoder for now. I just clicked on its device activator button just to turn it off. But here it is before. So we just got EQ, we just got compression, we just got chorusing. Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind. Cool, and I should also mention we do have some reverb and delay through these sends and returns, so we got that too. But I'm done with these. I like how they sound. I'm just gonna double click on their names to close them up so we can focus on vocoder. And now let us turn on vocoder. And let's see what we get. This might not be ideal yet, but let's see what happens. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Oh God. I always love doing that. It just gives me some kind of kick or something. I think that this effect, which happens when you directly put vocoder just on a piece of audio, is what drives people away from using it because it's the default. But maybe let's even take a step back from that. What exactly is a vocoder? What is vocal synthesis, right? Without going super nerdy or super in depth, a lot of the times people try to think of vocoding as maybe a robotic sort of voice or synthesizer voice, talking synths. That's oftentimes something that people have mentioned. I was almost going to say talking heads, but no, talking synths. So some kind of maybe synthesizer, robotic type of voice that maybe you've heard in a lot of music. A really great example of this that I think of off the top of my head is in so many Daft Punk songs, you hear a vocoder or some kind of electronic-y sort of voice, like in Around the World or in Get Lucky as well. Zed is also a really big vocoder producer. If anyone's familiar with Zed's music, he uses it oftentimes as a layer underneath vocals, which is maybe what we'll do today. Or we might not. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so a lot of people using things musically. Something related but not exactly the same is the use of a harmonizer, which if you've heard of the song Hide and Seek by Imogen Heap, which is a beautiful track, that's a harmonizer. So it's a little different from vocoder because harmonizers are taking copies of your voice and then kind of repitching that, versus vocoders will make use of some kind of synthesizer part, so an actual component of synthesis rather than transposing actual recordings of your voice. So, vocoder. Why does this sound so noisy? That's because over here, if we check out vocoder, we've got some kind of component over here that says carrier, and it's set to noise. So without going super, nerdy also, here's essentially how a vocoder works, especially if you're using two different kinds of signals. You've got something that's called the carrier, and you've got something that's called the modulator. In this case, we see the word carrier. I'm not going to go into the modulator yet. Maybe I will in a moment. We've got carrier over here. In simple terms, I like to think of carrier as just whatever is carrying the noise, right? So the main body of the noise. And in this case, we've the sound, so that we don't confuse ourselves. So the main sound source that is carrying the sound of the vocoder. And in this case, the thing that is carrying the sound of the vocoder is noise. So because of this, that's why we have something that's so noisy, because we're using some kind of internal noise generator in this vocoder device to give us that. So yeah, so it's like some kind of noise oscillator from within the device itself, which can be kind of cool. All right, oftentimes I've used vocoder in, I guess, a more traditional sense, but sometimes I throw this on and I mix it in a little bit with some noise on a specific sound. Because check this out, over here on the bottom right, we've got a control that we often see in pretty much any other kind of device that we use as an audio effect in live, this dry wet knob. And what this knob is going to let us do is mix between the dry signal, which is the unprocessed signal, and the wet signal, which is processed. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this one more time, and I'm going to click on the dry wet knob and mix the components of dry and wet signals. So here we go.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you
So there's
on
dry.
rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
And the wetter I go, I get more of that noisy sound. So that's one thing that you can do. I've actually used this. Where have I used this a lot? Because I do like some of the noisy qualities on drums. I've used it a bunch. And we might actually even be able to do that. Why don't we do that right now? So let's go ahead and create a new audio track. Sometimes I forget that live is actually in front of me. Let's just grab to illustrate how this goes, let's just grab some kind of sample. Maybe we'll use a drum loop of some sort. What would be a good one? Maybe we can do like there's I think a tech house drum loop if we find it. Ooh. Yeah. Let's try this out, everyone. So let's go ahead and solo this. And I'm going to head over to the Vox print track. For now, I'm just going to drag and drop this onto the tech house loop. And let's take a listen to what this sounds like. So that's wet. Pretty cool, right? That's the original. But if I mix it in at maybe like 30% dry wet, it adds some really interesting textures. So this is what I've done before in some of my compositions and productions that you might have heard out there under my dolltr project. Just mixing in a little bit to give the drums a little bit more interest in that sense. So cool, that's one thing that we can use the vocoder on. Thank you, drums, for letting us try that out with you. Let's go ahead and move the vocoder back to the vocal track, and let's move back to the thing that we talked about with carrier, right? So if you tuned into the vocal synth stream last week, thank you everyone who did tune in. This is where the routing part gets a little bit different. And by routing, all I mean is the way that we are asking signals inside Ableton Live to be directed to certain places. So for example, if I'm playing back the audio of this, the audio that's coming out of my vocal track over here is going towards my master track. So that's why we can hear it. We can all, listen to it as this goes along. And one thing that I do want to be careful of is the carrier itself, because I don't want the carrier to take noise as an input. Instead, I want the input routing to be from, say, some kind of external track. And that's because an external track will refer to any kind of other track in live. So it could be something like the chords, it could be something like a synth track that maybe we will pull up shortly to start doing some of the vocal synthesis. And that's where the power of using any kind of other plugin or instrument in live comes in. For vocal synthesis, I've found in my personal experience, and I think most people might concur, is that if you start with a bright synth sound, you're going to get a little bit more mileage out of it, because then there's more for you to kind of sculpt with. Oftentimes I think of really bright sounds like sawtooth waves, and sometimes even square waves, depending on what exactly you're doing, like if you have like a synced hard sync sound or something like that. But again, without getting too far ahead of myself, I always do this. If you start with a big sound, I like to think of it as like you're starting off with a very big giant block of, say, marble, and you want to make a statue. You can have more things to do. You can work around that a little more freely. You can carve things out, shape things a little bit more to how you would want them, versus, say, if you start with a very beautiful sort of polished sound that is maybe a bit more mellow and a bit more muted, you might not be able to get as much out of it as if you started with something that's a little brighter. So for that reason, one of my favorite vocoder sounds synth sounds to use for a vocoder context is the default setting of analog, which is one of the synths in live. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and create a new MIDI track. That's going to be Command-Shift-T or Control-Shift-T if you're on a Mac or a PC. And on the MIDI track, I'm going to head over into my instruments category in Live. Let's close out of the browser so that we get all of the options. And I'm just going to drag and drop analog onto this. Now, once I've done this, let's go ahead and arm the track. I'm going to unarm the chords. And here is our analog sound. Oh, we're not. hearing it? There we go. So as you can hear, it's very bright. It's kind of buzzy. That's because the default wave shape for analogs oscillators, if you pull one up, is a sawtooth. All right, so that's over here. You can see though that we have some options to shape it. Like there is a filter on analog, so you can, you know, make things a little less bright. But for now, I'm just going to start off bright. One thing I'm also noticing as I'm playing this, I'm going to go ahead and just bump the volume up a tiny bit. One thing I'm noticing as I'm playing this though is that there is a significant amount of release on the analog default itself. So for example, if I played this and if I let go of my hand, the sound doesn't die immediately, and I want it to die a little bit quicker. So that's what we call release whenever we're dealing with synthesizers. So I want the release to be a little bit shorter, and the place I'm going to go to for this is over here, the amplitude envelope of the sound. And all that means is the way that the sound's volume is being shaped over time. That's really what we mean when we say, oh, synth envelope, or if you've ever seen the term like envelope generator, envelope generator. I feel like I pronounce it both ways because sometimes I say it and I think about like a letter, but other times I say it and I think about synthesis. So here we go. Amplitude envelope. Yeah. I need to figure out which way I'm saying it. Maybe both. Language is so interesting and very inconsistent. Let's focus in on this. So what I want to happen is I actually want the release time to be a little shorter so that when a synth note is no longer playing, the sound dies out a little more quickly. So instead of having a release time of 500 milliseconds, maybe let's just make that about like 100 and something, so that we still get a little bit of release, but it's not cutting off too abruptly and it's also not super long. And maybe just to illustrate, if it were very long, then it would be something like, let's do like 8 seconds. Oh dear. And it's just going on and on. Cool. But let's make it that, 100. I can also like type that in, I think. No. Yeah, let's do like 150. I think that's good. Yeah, nice. What I also want to do for this particular case is I want the sustain to be all the way up. Right now, the sustain is about 50%. So what this means is that after the moment I press on this, the sound or the maximum volume of the sound is kind of decreasing a little bit until a midway point. So I want the sustain to be all the way up for the purposes of my vocoder sound. Like I said, starting off really rich and then sculpting things and scaling down after we've got that rich sound. So because of this, I can probably drop the volume a little now. Let's see. And it'll, sustain for a longer time. Excellent, great. So the cool part about this is that I already have my chord progression from the chords I initially did, right? So here is my chord progression that I played right at the beginning of the stream and also in previous weeks. That is the chord progression for this tune. So got some interesting like swaps between like minor 7 flat 5s and so on. But here we go. Let's go ahead and just copy these over. So I'm just gonna highlight all of these and paste them here. Whoops. Make sure that it's lined up. And now let's head back to our analog track and let's take a listen just to how it sounds off the bat. So very bright. Make it softer. Ooh, not too soft. All right, so as you can hear, it's all very static. I guess static's a good word. It's not changing much. But for now, this is what we want. We can always come back later and fine tune, but if you're just starting off, bright sound, good. So now we need to figure out how to route this though. So let's head back over to our Vox print track, which had our vocoder on it. We were halfway done with this. We've selected an external carrier. So now if I solo my vocal track again, remember just now when we had noise, we could hear the noisy stuff? Let's just take a listen to jog our memories. Noise. Ooh. Good. So there we go. But I wanted to switch it to external. And now, since I've got my analog track up, I'm going to choose audio from analog, the drop-down track. And also just to make everything very tidy, I'm a bit of an organizational freak if you've watched my previous stream. So let's keep this organized. Let's do vocoder synth, just so that I know visually like what I'm dealing with. And let's also go ahead and maybe just assign the track color to the clip so that everything's, again, very organized. The way I did that was right-clicking on the track name and then choosing the option to assign track color to clips. That's something that I think came out in... Might be Live 10. Actually, might have been Live 9. I don't know. I think it's Live 10. I think it was Live 10. My histories are a little bit murky now because I've just been thinking about Live 11. But it exists in Live 11 too. So now everything's organized. That's great. Now let's take a listen to our vocoder. Goodness, I almost said vocal synth. But no, this is not iZotope vocal synth. It's just vocoder. So here we go.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
Yeah, cool. Now we're talking. So we've got vocoder up and running, which is great. This is kind of like the very first step for the use of vocoder, everyone. And like you said, like I mentioned, it sounds very bright, but it's a very classic sort of vocal synthesizer sort of sound. Because it's so bright, it kind of gives you, I guess, a lot of clarity in the vocals as well. You can hear the top end, you can hear the enunciation of the words. One of my mentors and teachers kind of gave a little bit of a secret, and he was like, if you have a brighter sound and noisier type of material, it will be easier for the sounds to come through. So all of these things like sibilant sounds and so on. And maybe just to illustrate this, let's go ahead and keep the Vox print track soloed, but I'm going to head back over onto my vocoder synth. And remember what I did just now with like the changing the filter? Let's do that, but this time let's change the filter while listening to the vocoder sound, and maybe we'll find something that we like. Who knows? We'll see. Let's take a listen to this. So over here, let's do it.
Is it real? Is it in my mind?
But yeah, you can hear that if I have it a little bit more mellow, like with a more low sort of cutoff that's taking out a lot of the high end, the words don't come through as clearly.
Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
And I think even in this case, though, we don't actually need it to be super, super bright.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could.
But I think even just bringing it down to maybe about 5K as a cutoff works quite well. And maybe resonance might even be able to help us a little bit. So let's try that out.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but
Or not.
I keep putting you on rewind.
Sorry, everyone, for the clipping. Oh my goodness. I totally forgot that. I have my headphones on and then I see the metering and it's like, oh, so sorry about that. But maybe in this case, since our frequency is a little bit up, let's not do too much resonance, or maybe not even at all. Let's see. Let me just type this in also. Let's do 5,000. Enter. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So here's our vocoder.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
Yeah, cool. And if we do want to blend the two, like let's say we want to hear a little bit of the original too, we can also do that. So let's go back to our handy dandy dry wet knob, and let's see if this can help us out.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
Yeah, so we got that too. And this is sounding great. That said though, for now I may want to keep this up all the way just so we can hear clearly, and later towards the end of the stream I'll show you what the way that I usually end up doing a lot of vocoder types of sounds. So that's it for now. But I'm going to show you some neat tricks for kind of, doing a bunch of other things with vocoders and this iteration of the vocoder in a moment. For now, we're kind of like at the half-hour mark, so I just want to say hi to everyone again. Thank you all for tuning in to 343 TV. We are a daily streaming series over here on YouTube at youtube.com/343labs. If you haven't yet, and if you're enjoying this stream, please subscribe to us so that you can be updated for whenever we go live. I run the Monday show. My name's Claire. I'm an instructor at 343 Labs and an Ableton Certified Trainer. So my show that you're watching now is Tips and Tricks, which is a punny name created by our creative director, Tetro, who I think maybe heard of my artist named dolltr and was like, hey, let's make some puns. But I love puns. I'm a huge pun nerd. So that's tips and tricks every Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern time on the 343 Labs YouTube channel. Thank you all for watching. I also want to take a moment to, since I was just thinking about, how wonderful it is to have this like community of folks tuning in and us like talking in the chat and stuff like that. We have a Discord server, everyone. So if you do want to tune in to more of our streams or hang out with other like-minded folks who are interested in music production and electronic music, and if you enjoy our vibe, please join us over there. I'll see if we can put like the link in the chat somehow. If I can do it, then maybe someone on the team might. Big shout out also to Thomas, who's always helping us at 343 Labs manage everything behind the scene. Thomas is a champion. Thank you, Thomas. And yeah, if you do want to join us on Discord, we have a number of events that are happening. Sometimes we also collaborate, not sometimes, a lot of the time actually, we collaborate with other organizations and other really fun communities that also do a lot of electronic music related stuff. So an upcoming one that I'm participating in on behalf of 343 Labs and kind of repping the 343 Labs family for is the NY Topliner Camp. They have a beat battle that is this Thursday, and I think the application deadline for it is Monday, which is the day that this is airing. So today, if you want more information, I'll put it in the chat, or you can also just check them out on Instagram, NY Topliner Camp. I'm really happy I'm going to be a guest judge this week. Thank you to the folks over there for having me. Really excited for it. So yeah, if you want to enter, it's going to be kind of like a challenge of sorts where you have a sample that you're given, and you might have to do something with it. And as a hint, it might be something vocal related for me that comes out. So I hope you can participate if you're available, and it'll be definitely a really fun time. So really looking forward to that. Thank you to the folks there. And thank you also to Max, for our co-founder at 343 Labs, for helping make the connection too. So very excited for that, everyone. If you have questions, let me know in the chat and I'll try to get to them and also put a little bit more information about that. But yeah, just some upcoming events. That's going to be Thursday of this week. So please look forward to that. And also, before I forget, I mentioned subscribing to the YouTube channel. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell specifically, because that's how you're going to get pinged. And that's how you're going to be notified for whenever we have these. Even if you don't do that, you can always tune in every day at 1 p.m. We're going to be here. There will be somebody here. Just maybe not me, because I do the Monday show, but on Tuesdays we have Teatro Talk. So that's tomorrow. I'll speak maybe a bit more about that later too. Our other instructors who stream are Justin and Abe and Max, who do shows about theory and production basics and electronic music in general, getting started. Sometimes we also have sample challenges and feedback sessions. A lot of these things you can be notified of if you subscribe to our mailing list, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join us on Discord, and really just stay connected with the community. We love hearing from folks, and we love getting to know your music too. So yeah, please join us, and please stay tuned for right now. We're going to talk about more vocoder stuff. So let's head back over here to vocoder. Let's re-jog our memories. We've done a lot of jogging. Let's sprint our memories, maybe. Let's take a listen to what we have so far. We got a pretty neat sort of sound in the vocoder setup that we currently have. We were running analog. That was the external sound source, the carrier for whatever we were using with our modulator, the vocal. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
Yeah, I should also mention that I forgot to do this at the beginning of the stream, but this is a tune called Rewind from my artist project. I spoke about the project, but I didn't even talk about the tune. Whoops. But it's called Rewind. So hence, which you might have guessed from the lyrics. But let's go ahead, and now that we have our main sort of vocoder setup, let's look at some specific controls in this particular device that we can use to further shape the sound a little bit more. So now that we've got the technical stuff, now's the designy stuff. One of my favorite things to play with, which maybe your mileage might vary with this, but I love the way that vocoder or really a lot of vocal synthesis type plugins will let you change the format of a sound, like the timbre, harmonic structure of a sound. So over here, this is something that we saw in vocal synth last week too, but over here it is this knob that says format. It kind of shifts the frequencies of this setup over here. We've got a filter bank in the middle, which I'll talk a bit more about. But let's take a listen just to what the format knob does. You can click on a knob in Live and move it up and down to change its value. That's pretty much the same for any knob that you play with. So let's go ahead and click on this. I'll double click to reset, and then we'll play it back, and then I'll do the switching while we listen. Here we go. Cool. So the way that the format knob is working is if I have it adjusted a little more to the right, we're getting a sound that's maybe almost chipmunky, I guess. In some ways, chipmunky is a good descriptor. I use it quite often. And if we move it to the left, we almost get like that kind of classic deep voice. It reminds me of, I don't know if anyone's watched this or remembers this really, but Dory from Finding Nemo doing her whale voice. Like that's very low formanty. So that's what it does. Oftentimes, if I'm using vocoders, I love tweaking this just because it makes the sound a little bit more interesting, I guess, from a normal sort of voice. And format, I feel, is one of those controls that you can really go crazy with, and you'll always find something very interesting to do with it. So, for example, in this case, is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. I kind of like it a little bit to the left, so a little bit of a darker color to the tone that's coming in. So, and this will sound good when we start eventually, layering it with the main vocal that I had in mind. So, great formats. Now, let's think a little bit about this in the middle, though, because this is the filter bank. And again, without nerding out too much, a filter bank is a bank of filters, right? It's a little bit self-explanatory, but what this means is that there are different types of filters out there. A lot of people might be familiar with, say, low-pass filters on a synthesizer. In fact, that's the one that we used over here. We had a low-pass filter, 24 dB per octave. And back over here, we have band-pass filters instead. So this is a filter bank consisting of band-pass filters. A band-pass filter is a type of filter that only pertains to a certain frequency. So it lets a specific band or range of frequencies be effective. That's kind of the name of it and the thing that it does, hence the name. The way that this works, this filter bank, is that if you want to, say, shape the sound of the vocoder a little bit more, you have this really handy-dandy pencil that maybe might remind you a bit of draw mode, but note that we're not actually in draw mode in Live right now. We're just using this pencil that pops up over here. It's going to let you draw in the shape of the filter bank frequencies that you might want to hear. Also, my mic just popped. Whoops, I'll just stay a little bit further away. But this sound, for example, is very bright at the moment, right? Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. And for the purpose of what I want to do over here, there's also quite a lot of low end in this. So I might want to do a little bit of a dip over here. I'm going to click and drag my pencil so that I'm almost getting, in a way, some kind of low shelf. It's almost like an EQ in a way. And let's take a listen. Maybe I'll make the first pass of this like kind of drastic. So what if I do this? So very drastic. But you can kind of hear how now the sound of the vocoder is lacking that little bit of low end. And I don't want to do something that's this drastic, but I did want to tame it a little bit so that I'm not getting a lot of super like whoa, whoa, whoa sorts of sounds. And it might also be a little bit hard to hear through the streaming algorithms and so on. We all know what is audio fidelity nowadays, like with the virtual stuff that's happening. But let's redo this. So I'm gonna to redraw my shape, and actually let's go ahead and reset these. And I just want to do a little tiny dip over here, so not super drastic, but is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind. So maybe a little bit like that, just to take away a bit of the bottom end. Not to make things super thin, but really to help a little bit with cleaning up the sound, especially because in the broader scheme of things, I wouldn't want this to be a part of my production that maybe has things like bass and it has stuff like drums that potentially might have a lot of low end. So I don't want to clog that up too much. So great, this is really helpful. I've got this kind of sound with my filter bank and I got my format stuff. Something that I want to keep in mind, and this is maybe also related to, remember the noisy thing that we heard earlier with the noise carrier, is that vocoder sounds, I do want there to be a little bit of like an emphasized intelligibility with a lot of the consonants that are coming through. And I guess this is maybe where my background and stage stuff kind of comes in a little bit. But when you hear people pronounce their consonants, if they are coming through some kind of vocoder or something that transforms the timbre of their voice, you could potentially get certain words and enunciation compromised. So that's where I found this knob on the bottom left called Unvoiced really helpful. What this knob is going to do is control a little bit of vocoder's internal noise oscillator, which I touched on a little bit earlier. But without going super nerdy off the bat, let's go ahead and take a listen, and let's just move the knob up, and we'll see what we get. I'll also be a little careful because depending on how this is used, you might want to protect your ears. So you do want to protect your ears, but you might want to be careful of the volume. So here we go.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
Cool, so you can kind of hear it every time I have a super sibilant sound. I'll play that one more time. This time I'll bring the volume down a little, but just take a listen and see if you can get the sorts of sounds. So here we go. Here's Unvoiced all the way up.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you
Right,
on
stop.
rewind. Wish I could
Wish.
let you go this time, but I
This.
keep putting you on rewind.
So in this case, it's kind of making those a little bit more emphasized, and I did something very exaggerated. So I might even find like a common ground, maybe about like -20-ish or so. That's pretty good for that. And that's generally what I do, I think, for most of the time that I use this. Sometimes if I want the sound to be very muted, though, I might not even bring that up. But it helps to bring a little bit more of that enunciation to the table after you've processed something through vocoder. Great. So this is one thing that I do in a lot of the dolltr stuff. But I often like also just layering it with an existing vocal, right? So and here is the thing that can be done many ways. Like a lot of other things in life, you can totally manage this however you want to. We already explored the idea of using the dry wet knob to mix in some of the original. So for example,
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop
and then just
putting you on
subtly
rewind.
blending in the
Wish I
vocal.
could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
So that's one way that you could potentially achieve some kind of mixed hybrid original vocal sound layered with the vocoder. I have done that before, but I found that for mixing purposes, and again, your mileage may vary, I found it more useful to just have a clean vocal track and then have that layered. In a way, this kind of applies a little also to, it's a little bit of a similar paradigm to why we put certain things on sends, why we use certain audio effects with sends and returns rather than, say, just directly putting it onto a track. Although in that case, in the case of sends and returns like reverb and delay, we want it to also be shared between different types of instruments. But in this case, I think it will be a lot easier to manage if I'm independently adjusting the vocoder volume from the volume of, say, my clean vocal. So let's go ahead and duplicate this Vox print track, and then I'll do a little bit more of specific naming. So let's go ahead and duplicate this. Now we have two of these. I'm going to leave one as it is and then delete the vocoder from that one. And then on this track now, this is still the one with the vocoder on it. So let's go ahead and rename it. Let's call it vocoder audio, since that's where it's coming through. So now if I solo these three tracks, these two, I actually have one more thing that I want to show y'all in a moment. But I'm soloing these two tracks now. I got my Vox print, that was my clean thing, if you will. And then I've got my vocoder audio. Here's what it sounds like.
Is it real? Is is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
Great, and that was already much easier for me to kind of manage. This way also, if I wanted to, I can put different amounts of reverb and delay on these types of sounds. For example, I just listening to that off the bat, I was immediately thinking less delay on the vocal, that's clean. So maybe something like, let's do like -40. And then a bit more on the vocal synthesis. So maybe a little here, and then more reverb on the vocal itself. And a little less on the vocoder audio. So different types of effects that we can use and kind of blend in with each other. And you also might have noticed that I actually brought up the clean vocal now because I want that to be a little more forward compared to the vocoder so that we get a nice sort of blend.
Is it real love? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
And then we get that nice delay with the vocoder audio. Yeah, very cool. Here's one thing to keep in mind though. Remember how we were taking the audio from this track? Now that I've unsoloed everything, I should have everything playing in my tune, right? Let's go ahead and just play things back and let's see what we notice.
Is it real love? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
Ah, okay. So, when I unsolo everything, we're actually still hearing the original vocoder synth come through. But I'm not sure if I want this, right? Because my purpose of choosing this sound because it was so bright and I wanted it to specifically be for the vocoder and not, be an existing part of this. So because of that, I'll need to mute it. So, and it's very simple. We just need to mute the vocoder synth track. It will still play as a vocoder sound. Let's take a listen.
Is it real love? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
How curious, right? Why is this happening? We've got the vocoder synth track muted, but somehow the vocoder device is still able to pick up the sound. And that's because of the routing thing. So back to the routing that I mentioned earlier on in the stream. Let's head over here back to our vocoder track. So yes, we had external because we're taking the vocoder sound source, the carrier from another track that's not the internal vocoder, something from the internal vocoder. And we specifically took it from the vocoder synth. By default, this second drop-down menu came up as post effects. And this is something that you'll pretty much find in most different routing things with audio that you do in live. There are oftentimes 3 options. So if I click on this drop-down menu, we've got pre-effects, post-effects, which in this case was the default that popped up, and then we've got post-mixer. And these are 3 stages of the audio signal in live. What happens with each of these? Let's maybe even explore a little bit. So post effects, this was the default, right? That came with this. And let's go back to soloing our vocoder.
Is it real love? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
And then if I do post mixer, let's see what happens. Remember, keep in mind I muted the track, right? So so the only things that we're getting are the sorts of things, right? And that's because the unvoiced oscillator is turned out. Remember, this is the internal noise generator from vocoder as a device, but we're not actually hearing any of the mixer, the synth sound, because in our mixer, which is like these controls over here, we muted the track. So post mixer, I'm not going to get any sound. Post effects, I will though, because I'm just taking any kinds of sounds that maybe might be after here, and then I'm taking some kinds of signal from that point in the signal chain, and then I'm able to hear that. So let's go ahead and take a listen. Did I set this back to post effects? Yes, I did. Okay.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I
Cool. Now let's try that third option that I mentioned. And this one might be a little interesting. So let's do pre-effects. We might be able to guess that it's actually pre any effects, right? So, so before any kinds of audio effects that we might have in the chain.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind.
And in this case, it sounds pretty much the same as post effects. Why? That's because we actually don't have any effects in the chain on the vocoder synth MIDI track, right? We only have the instrument over here, which is a device in Live, but it's not actually an effect. So maybe just to illustrate the difference between these two settings, pre-effects and post-effects. Just before I wrap up, maybe this will be one of the last things. Let's head over to audio effects, and I'm gonna grab, what would be good to demonstrate this? I think maybe chorus and ensemble can help us a little bit. So here we go. Here is, and let's make this very drastic, so we'll set this up all the way, maybe make the chorusing amount a little bit larger too. So here is pre-effects. So kind of like the original. Now, let's see what happens if we take this post effects. Maybe the sound is a little different. We'll see. Ooh. That was a good decision. I'm glad that we did that. I'm glad I chose that. And yeah, now I know what to do to get this type of sound in the future. But yeah, so by choosing post effects, I'm taking the signal in the chain as it's coming out over here, like after my chorus ensemble. Before that, I was taking it before the chorus ensemble. But this is really good because then I can kind of decide, do I actually want, a specific sound to just be taken pre-effects if I'm recording it, not even in a vocoder context, but maybe if I'm just recording audio from another track, rerouting it, printing it, stuff like that. Which maybe is also something that we talked about in the earlier weeks when I talked about printing vocals that are processed with tuning and stuff like that. So now we're closer to, I guess, the final thing that we need to, the final sound that we wanted, right? So here we go.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
And I'm just gonna listen to this one more time, maybe tweak a couple of parameters on my chorus ensemble device over here. This is a new device that came with Live 11, or that is coming with Live 11 when it drops tomorrow. But in the meantime, let's head over back here. Same dry wet knot that we've seen in most of our audio effects, including Vocoder. And I also want to change a little bit of the amount and the rate. Maybe find something that's a little different from the default. So here we go.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind. Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind. Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind. Wish I could let you go this time, but I keep putting you on rewind.
Yeah, cool. I think I'm pretty happy with this particular sound, so I'm going to save. Always forget. But save, I just used Command S or Control S, depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC, just to save the work that I've done so far. But great, now I've got some kind of vocal synth sound layered with my clean vocal, and it's really starting to shape up as to how I would usually use a vocoder. But as like I mentioned, you can use this in many different ways. In this context, I really wanted something that would go with my clean vocal, but if I were to just, play the vocoder on its own.
Is it real? Is it in my mind? I can't stop putting you on rewind.
Maybe if I were doing this, I might even increase the unvoiced things a little bit more just to get more of the sibilant sounds coming through, or I might even choose a specifically even brighter sound by not filtering the original sound of the vocoder. So your mileage really may vary depending on what you're doing this with. The great part is that with vocoder, you aren't going to actually get super a lot of CPU problems because it's a native Live device. And I mean, granted, some Live devices that are native are a little bit more CPU heavy. Wavetable. But over here with vocoder, it's not too bad. If I play this back, I think my CPU is only going, only about 10% or so. And it's only going up that much in part because I am streaming this and recording this, so there's a lot of processes that my computer is handling, but on your own. It shouldn't take too much. And also my buffer size is pretty small, just so I can get not too much latency while I'm recording this. But yeah, that's kind of how to get started, or a couple of ways maybe to get started using Live's native vocoder for vocoding. I will also add that I have a specific vocoder tutorial for Live 10 on my own YouTube channel too, because I do run my own YouTube stuff too. If you want to check out my channel in all lowercase letters as dolltr!CK, you are more than welcome to, and I'd be happy to say hi to you over there as well in my dolltr artist project mode. But otherwise over here, this is pretty much what I am super happy to share about as well. I love talking about vocoder stuff, vocal synthesis with all of y'all. And I'm really thankful to have everyone here be a part of the community. So just as I'm wrapping up, thank you so much everyone again for tuning in. Tomorrow is Tuesday. It is the release of Live 11. Ooh, so woo! Good stuff. We also have Techo Talks tomorrow at 1 p.m. on our YouTube channel. So please stay tuned for that. Techo is our creative director at 343 Labs. He is awesome. And maybe he'll talk about Live 11. I don't know. Or maybe he'll talk about something else. He always has really great topics, and oftentimes he'll have invited guests. So if you want to stay in the loop, make sure that you subscribe. You can be notified if you click on the notification bell and you get a little ping when we go live. But otherwise, I will be back again for another episode of Tips and Tricks next week. Same time, same virtual space, if you will. And yeah, really excited to keep going. We may or may not talk about more device-related things next week. So maybe not specific vocals, but maybe specific devices and effects in Live, especially since by next week, Live 11 would have been officially official. So it would have been out. But let us know also if you've, been following the Ableton Live announcements, if that's been a thing for you. Let us know if you're going to get Live 11. I will also add that if you're a student with 343 Labs, you can get a discount on Ableton products. So regardless of whether that is Live, which is the software, or Push, which is the hardware, and which I'm a big fan of too. I love using Push. But yeah, I hope to see everybody again next week. Thank you all for tuning in. Let us know in the comments, or in the comments. Yeah, I thought it was, chat. Let me know in the chat, because I'll be hanging out in the chat, right? So let me know in the chat if you do have any final questions as we wrap up. Or if you enjoyed this after the stream and you want to drop us a nice comment, you can totally do that too. We're always grateful for the support. Hope to see you on Discord or on YouTube or in the greater 343 Labs space, and have a wonderful week. Everyone, see y'all soon. Ooh, bye.
Morning light, break me through the dark. One so bright, show your dying star. Cold as ice, piercing through the heart. Warm the skies, melt the days apart. Wanna hide away, try to run away, tell me if you could save me. Got me falling through ashes, in the dust of the